Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, dermatologist, and joining me again this week, a little under the weather, is capping with Candace Hare. She's got a little bit of a runny nose. And Candace, this week, we go to that quirky Tampa Bay surface. I don't think as a handicapper you're allowed to handicap it without mentioning quirky in it. We've got the Suncoast Stakes and we've got the Sam F. Davis. And then we're also going to talk about the Las Virgenes at Santa Anita. But the Suncoast Stakes, I thought, came up very competitive.
I agree that it definitely came competitive. Several of these horses have ran against each other before and come here with some interesting form. A few horses that when I look here that I think might take some money are Blue Eyed Babe and Lady Foghorn, who've run against each other a few times. But when I look at their form, one thing that stands out to me immediately is that they've both really thrived over downgraded surfaces. So unless we get some rain in the area, there are two horses who might be played a fair bit that I would really be against in this kind of a spot. For me, I'm not going to get too creative here. I'm going to go with the horse on the rail, Irish Jasper. She won a local stakes over 7 furlongs last time out. I like her running style, that she can run pretty close to the speed, but doesn't have to be on it. There are a couple horses, namely Huasca, who breaks from the number 2 post, who will want to go forward. So if she can set just off the pace, I think that could be a really good spot for her. She's first time Lasix here as well, and I did really like that last race from hers. She was kind of wide and really just kind of ground them down to get the win there. So I think her running style suits in this type of a race, and being that she ran so well over 7 furlongs twice in a row now, I don't think this mile distance is going to be any sort of a problem for her. Whereas some of these others are, really stretching out to a distance that might be a little bit questionable for them.
Yeah, I like you, Irish Jasper, not as my top pick. I think there's three things going for her. She gets first Lasix. She's won 3 out of 4, and she's definitely proven at that track, and she has an inside post. Another horse I wanted to mention was Whimsically. This horse is trained by Graham Motion, and a lot of people may remember that mare. She was a stakes-winning mare in New York, also ran at Monmouth and some other tracks on the East Coast, and she's already produced a couple of good horses. Some people might remember Bit of Whimsy. So I think this horse is bred to be a good one, but when I look at that pedigree, I totally think turf. AP's Glory lost to Irish Jasper in kind of the prep race the last time. I think she's much better than that, so I expect her to improve that 8-length deficit this time. But my top choice is Include Betty. I've had her in my stable mail for a while. Put her in there after her debut race. She faced a nice horse in Tis Sexy Now. Then she went up against a future stakes winner in Bird on the Wire the last time, 2 races back, and then she broke her maiden last time at Tampa. So I think she's kind of turning that corner. She's faced some good horses, and she's faced 2 12-horse fields. And I think there might be enough speed. So Include Betty is my top choice. Anything else about this race that interests you?
One thing I will say with Include Betty is, like I said, if they get a little bit hot up front, which is possible, a couple front runners in here, she might be one who could be suited by that. But she does have some trouble out of the gate at times. Back to Irish Jasper, the one thing I forgot to note too is that, her speed figures have really gradually improved with the further distances she's ran, and at this time of the year, that's always a good thing when you see their speed figures improving the further they stretch out.
What about Ancient Goddess? I think some people may think she has a little bit of a class edge on them coming in from Belmont and Churchill. Any notes on her?
Um, Not really. I think especially in that last race in the Golden Run, which was won by West Coast Bell, she just really wasn't in it there at all. And she's just one who really hasn't been close. And even if she's been running at bigger tracks than these, it's tough for me to take a horse who has, at least since she's been in America, hasn't been anywhere near winning races. And I think, if anything, her best races have been on the turf. She's also one who can be a little bit headstrong, so maybe I see her as maybe a bit of more of a pace factor than anything else, though she is blinkers off here.
Yeah, she looks more like a turfer to me, so I'm thinking long term that's going to where she's really going to excel. The Sam F. Davis, I think there were some horses in here a lot of people expected, but then a couple of surprise entrants. Now, this race doesn't have any quote unquote Derby points, but it is a nice prep for the Tampa Bay Derby. And I thought a really representative field, and I think there's some local tigers here that are going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting race because we get some of the horses from Gulfstream, and then we have some of the horses who've been running locally here. My top choice and potentially the favorite, though I don't think we're going to get a really short price favorite here, is going to be Catalina Red breaking from the rail. Has won two in a row. That last race in particular I thought was really nice, and the way he kind of just wore them down late. He's by Munnings, who, really I just think has been producing runner after runner these days. And, he's obviously, you say this track is a corky track. Well, he's a horse who's really thrived over this surface as well. And I think he's going to get a little bit of a setup here. I think Royal Sun is probably the horse you'll see on the lead, though he's not the type to, set any sort of brisk fractions by any means. He's a pretty one-pace type, but he does like to go forward, and I think Royal Sun will take some money, but he still needs to improve in the speed figure department, and he's beginning to be a little bit of a tough one for me. His pedigree I love as a Derby contender, but Royal Sun really needs to have a breakthrough. If not here, I don't really know when. Just speed figures wise, he's a little bit still behind the eight ball at this point, and he's one who seems to struggle a bit running inside, and yet he keeps drawing inside. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles that factor once again. Amy's Flatter, who I know you picked, and the Mucho Macho Man ran really well there. It'll be interesting to see how he balances back off of a pretty big performance in there behind Bluegrass Singer, who came back to finish third last week in the Holy Bull. So I'm going to go with Catalina Red on top. I think it might be a little bit contested pace up front. Royal Sun probably on the lead, but I don't expect a very fast pace here. So Catalina Red can just sit off the pace. I think that's kind of going to give him a little bit of the box seat run here. The other one I'll give mention to is Ocean Knight, who got a big figure on debut, really impressed a lot of people. The stretch out from 6 furlongs should suit here. Now routing, I just not sure if this post position is going to hinder him too much, which is why I won't put him on top. He is a horse who likes to kind of press the pace, so coming from that outside position, he's going to need a little bit of luck from the gate, I think, to really be in a good spot early on, but I do expect him to run well. So I'll say Catalina Red on top, Ocean Knight second, Royal Sun third.
Kind of interesting, I think Ocean Knight's going to be the favorite, really getting bet hard in futures in Las Vegas. A lot of talk about this horse, but he does get the 11 hole. It's kind of an unusual move for the trainer of this horse to go to Tampa Bay, and it's almost like if you win too good in your debut by 4 or 5 lengths, a lot of these horses kind of get stuck because they never go through those allowance conditions, and then all of a sudden they got to face some tough horses on paper. And what do you think about Ocean Knight? Do you think, like, can he lose and still develop, or is this kind of like if he loses here, like maybe he's just not as good as some people think?
Yeah, I think he really needs to win here or at least go close. If he was not in the picture at all without some sort of big trip troubles, then my thought would be that he's not as good, at least his connections think. The fact that they went from, that main special weight spot to here in a stakes, they must think well of him. So if he didn't run close, that would definitely be a little bit of a turnoff, I would say.
So in this race, I really had it down to a couple of horses. I was looking at Ocean Knight. I didn't like that post position draw. But a horse that I've really been waiting to see come back is called My Johnny Be Good. Now this horse has one of those little things where it's totally visual. But, I always mention how I like a horse who, in their maiden win or an allowance race, where they'll just kind of lower their head and really stride out. And in that Eagle race, he did that. All of a sudden, like, Eagle was up by like 3.5 lengths, and all of a sudden, near the wire, this horse just, like, it clicked. And it doesn't always work, but it usually, to me, is a sign that, like, I saw it with Tonalist last year. I've seen it with a couple other horses this year. Then he came back and just, I mean, that was a racehorse time the last time, a 109. He's by Colonel John. This horse is bred to run this distance. It's got some good breeding on both sides. I just think that my Johnny Be Good's going to be 6-7 to 1. He's ran over the surface. He's coming off a 109 speed figure. Like, he just fits on everything. I like the way he's developed. And he's had a couple of races. Like, those one-hit wonders are just so hard to know whether they're going to, he's had that loss and then he had the big win. And I kind of like that. So I like my Johnny Be Good. Me and you have probably had more discussions on Royal Sun than any two humans in America. But, the one thing with him is that we both like the pedigree. But like, he's had those inside runs. He seems to be one speed though. But like, one of these races, I do think he might jump forward, kind of like my Johnny Be Good did the last time. I just don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah, I know that's how I look at him too. He's very one pace. He's a grinder. He's a horse who we'd expect, I think, to improve with further distances. People maybe not look at Tampa and this being a mile and the 16th as being very different from a mile last time out, but at Gulfstream, the mile is a one-turn mile. So now stretching out to two turns, I do and expect an improved effort. I just don't know if it's going to be good enough yet in this kind of a spot. And I don't really like him drawing inside again, because I do think he kind of struggles dealing a little bit with that pressure from the outside, just from a mental standpoint. And yeah, I mean, he's one who he's going to need to take a step forward, but I do worry that maybe ultimately for him to get the win, he's a horse who's going to have to get the perfect setup, that he's a consistent runner, but being as one pace as he is, maybe he's the type who is going to need a little bit of a, like, maybe cheap speed dueling in front of him, of a spot where he'd inherit the lead, I would say.
Well, I think we've seen some blowouts in some of the other races. I think this is going to be a competitive race. I will be shocked if anybody wins by more than a length and a half or 2 lengths here. I did want to mention Divining Rod. This horse has some interesting pedigree. The mare's already produced another outstanding kitten, and this one goes to Tappet. It won its debut in the slop, and then to me, that last race has all the looks of just a run around the track prep race. Now it goes back to the dirt. I agree with you, though. I think Amy's Flatter's worked out a couple of nice times since that last race. So I'm going to go my Johnny Be Good, Amy's Flatter, and then I like Catalina Red. I just think Ocean Knight, trainer, the surface, the outside post, all of a sudden you start putting check marks. And not that he's a bad horse, I just can't take 7 to 5 on a horse what I consider 3 check marks. Is there anybody else that you think might kind of surprise or want to mention for pedigree wise?
No, I think we had it covered.
The final race, the Las Virgenes from Santa Anita. This is always interesting because it's a grade 1. It's at the end of January, and a lot of times you get just a lot of allowance non-winners of 1, some maiden winners. 10 horses in the race, and they might have to rename it the Jolly Jerry Hollendorfer Invitational. He has 5 of the horses in there.
Yeah, he has half the field covered. I guess he has a couple that could be favored here. I'm going to guess that the favorite, though, will be a horse named Glorious. Is a Fox Hill Farm Tappet. She finished second on debut to Callback, who also shows up here in what turned out to be a pretty live maiden special weight there. Came back and won really well to break her maiden last time out, going 6.5 furlongs. She's a tough one for me in the spot at what's going to probably be a pretty short price. I think she definitely wants to stretch out to a mile, but I do wonder if she's a little bit too tappety mentally wise for me to take her in this kind of a spot. She did pull early on in that last race, and she was just too good. She won anyway, but I always worry about those types of horses when they step up in class. You typically can't get away with those sorts of things against better runners. So she's one who, I'd use her underneath, but I couldn't take her on top just because mentally I'm a little bit worried about her going against better competition. Ultimately, I'm going to go with Light the City. This is another Hollendorfer entrant, breaking from the outside. Her first 3 races all were very good. She won her first 2, stretched out to 7 furlongs at Del Mar in her third start, finished third. Really showed some good grit there, fighting back after losing the lead. Last time out, she ran in the grade 2 Santa Ynez, which was just, it was run on a ridiculous day as far as track bias is concerned. There was pretty much a gold rail that day, and Light the City had one of the widest trips in the field, so it's a race that I'm more than willing to forgive of hers. And I think we might get a little bit better price than we normally would because people will look and see, like maybe Seduir and say, well, she ran awful last week, so maybe this horse isn't that good, but I do think she's good. That's a race that I'm more than willing to forgive in this spot. And I think that, being by street sense out of an APND mare, this, stretch out distance shouldn't be any sort of a problem for her. Considering the money she's taken in a lot of her races, I think she's a horse who, definitely people have been on to, but, maybe with Glory and a few others in here, we'll get a little bit better price. So I'm going to go with Light the City on top here.
Yeah, I think you may have hacked into my stable mail because I've got two horses. One is Glory, the second one is Light the City. I am going with Glory. The problem is you never get over even money on a Fox Hill farm horse. It just doesn't matter. Normandy Invasion was hammered every race. Cassatt's hammered every race. This horse is hammered every race. He was 4 to 5. I mean, I'm just going to go with the raw talent, inside post. I love the last race. Flat out looked like a monster. I think she beat a monster, the second place horse in that race. And then that last race by Light the City was just too bad. I'm just tossing it out. He had the winner that day. The rail was weird, but I just think they were wide, and then the jockey just knew that Hollendorfer was winning it with Swedire, and he just pulled up the horse, and now they stretch it out. So maybe I'm just a sucker for another bad bet, but I think it's Light the City is live in this spot. I do want to put in Call Me Back just because she beat Glory and she closed the last time, so I guess you kind of have to have her in there. And, Street Sense out of Forest Wildcat says this isn't totally out of her distance. So although I was expecting two other Bob Baffert horses to be in this race, and they're not. So something changed in the last week with those horses. And Lutina Bell, this horse kind of been bouncing around at different tracks, different distances. She could just be the type of horse that's kind of maybe starting to get it a little bit. And so I don't think Lutina Bell is totally out of the realm here.
No, I don't either, and I also wanted to make mention of a few speed horses in here as well. Suva Harbor is a horse who tends to really go forward. Another one, and maybe the more dangerous one, to Glory, who likes to run forward, is Maybelline. This is a horse who finished third in the Starlet behind Take Challenge Brandy and Feathered. Very consistent type. In her last 5 runs, only once finished outside of the top 3. Always seems to go close. So Maybelline, potentially for Bob Baffert, is a little bit of a classier type here on the cutback, who likes to be forwardly placed. So it'll be an interesting test to see how Glory she keeps herself composed in that type of a situation.
Looking forward to the race. I think if everybody will be in shock if Jerry Hollendorfer doesn't win it with one of those 5, because even the 2 that we didn't talk about, Achiever's Legacy, has a little bit of things going for her. And I think really he doesn't even know. He's just going to lay them all out there and kind of like they used to do back in the late 1800s. You just have a match race and see which one of yours is the best. So should be an interesting day of racing, the 2 from Tampa Bay and the quirky surface, and then we go out west to Santa Anita. Now next week we're going to be honing in on a couple of 3-year-old races, and then I think we'll pick one of the older races, but the Robert Lewis is next week, also the Withers, and then pool number 2 of the Kentucky Derby Future Wager, so we may talk about that for a few minutes. That's going to do it for Candace Hare and for myself on another edition of Down to the Wire.